Hello, good almost Shabbos. It's Shabbat Ha-Gadol this week. Exactly why it's called the Great Shabbos Shabbat Ha-Gadol isn't pretty unclear. It's been unclear for a really long time. But at least one plausible explanation is that it comes from the traditional Haftarah that we read, which ends with, or just about ends with, "Hinei anochi sholech et Eliyahu Hanavi." Behold, I shall send before you Elijah the prophet, Lifnei bo yom Adonai hagadol v'hanara, before the coming of the day of the Lord, the great and awesome day of the Lord, hagadol. So the linguistic reference and something about the experience of the impending day of God's glory and judgment is supposed to frame our experience of this Shabbat before Pesach. And I figured it's always good to learn the Haftorah. I wanted to just take a little walk through it. I will warn you, this is not an easy Haftarah to read, especially under current circumstances, and I want to lean into that a little bit. But the hope is that we will end with a positive and hopeful message, and generally find some meaning and guidance. The Haftarah is from the end of Sefer Malachi. It's thought of, the rabbis think it was the last prophet, is the end of Treasar. He's working in the early part of the Second Temple period, presumably. Is under Persian rule. The people have come back from Babylonia, Persia, to Jerusalem, have resettled the area and started rebuilding the temple. And trying to just generally restore their lives to what they'd in their world to what they had before the destruction. So generally, this is not a particularly calamitous period of Jewish history. It's not. There's no major catastrophe happening right now. There was not long before, but this is not the worst they've seen. But it is. When you read through the history in Ezra and Nehemiah, it's a hard time, just a tough, mean, difficult time. People are barely surviving at subsistence levels, trying to find enough food. No one can get along there. Everything they try to do and everything all their attempts to restore the temple and to get things going again and rebuild their lives they're stymied at every turn by local opposition. Everything is just hard and mean and tough, and there's no security and safety. They're dependent on foreign powers, and there's just a general sense that they're on their own, and there's no one looking out for them. And then so there's a feeling of general malaise, which turns into a kind of refusal of hope, which manifests specifically in a refusal to acknowledge their ongoing relationship with God, and to want to think that can't be possible anymore. Or at least not as it was. And so the Haftarah begins the kind of plea from God's end. It's a promise that's a plea. God says, the offerings which you bring to me from Judah and Israel, they can be sweet to me again. We can restore our relationship of sweetness and goodness and light, and we can be on good and happy terms again, just like we were in the past, just like we've always been, and just like we were in the past, as you still remember. We can have that again. It's still real. But then the next pasuk immediately turns in a much harder direction. And I will, when that happens, when our relationship is sweet again, I will approach you again with judgment. I will hold you to account. I will bear witness against you, and I will hold you to account for all of your sins, for your turning away from me to sorcery, and specifically for your subversion of justice and basic basic social kindness or just basic social decency, in refusing payment to laborers, in subverting justice for widows and orphans and foreigners, just basic levels of maintaining a just and decent society, of giving people the wages that they deserve, and not oppressing and extorting the most weak and vulnerable. And rather, you must, if you have not actively protected the most vulnerable and cared for their needs, then I will hold you to account. And so what it means to restore our relationship of sweetness and goodness and for us to be on good terms again is precisely that, just is to say that I'm going to hold you to account. There are still standards and expectations. And just because the world is mean and tough and you feel like you've been abandoned, that doesn't mean you don't have the basic responsibilities of decency to your society. And God says, Ki ani Adonai lo shaniti. I, God, have not changed. When things felt good, I was there and I was the same. And when things are tough, I'm still here and I still care and I still have expectations for you. And you have not been destroyed. I have not destroyed you. And so I'm still here, you're still here, and we're both still, we need to be on the same team, and there are still, we can restore things again, and there are still standards. And then God carries on and says, but despite the fact that I'm still here and I still care, you've been terrible since the beginning. It's always been really tough. Because you stolen from me. We'll get to that in a second. And God says, Shuva Elai, return unto me. Please return to me, V'ashuva alechem, and I will return to you. Again, we can still restore our relationship. But then the people respond. They say, how can we return? It's not possible. And things are terrible. We're terrible. It's just not reasonable to hold us to any higher expectations or for us to live our lives as if there's something higher and as if there's a God that we owe anything to. And God says, look, what I want from you, I don't want anything extraordinary. I'm not asking for something larger than life or even just something particularly high or elevated. I'm asking you to bring your maaser and truma to the temple. He says these basic rules of when you get produce, which at this point you're blessed with because not everyone has it. When you get produce, you need to separate small amounts, 1/50th for Truma, 1/10 for Maser, and that is meant to go. It was originally yours, but it's not supposed to stay in your hands. It's supposed to be released for the support and care of public servants. There are people, God says, who have devoted their lives to serving the people and providing for their needs, spiritual and material, and making the life of the nation possible. And those people require your support. And what you have been doing is withholding even the most basic levels because all you care about now is yourselves. And you say, this is just a mean world. I can be mean too. And God says, well, all I'm asking from you is just the most basic level of openness and generosity to give some amount of your bounty to the people who make your lives possible. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. There's a lot still further back and forth, and God's promise of an impending day of judgment is going to hold everyone to account, and the wicked are going to perish. There's a final plea at the end, Zichru Torat Moshe Abdi. I please remember the law of Moshe, Father. Just if you forget nothing else, just please remember. Again, there was a law. We had a Torah that was our covenant together. Please just try to remember it and what it meant. And then, but after these promises of like impending doom for sinners, and there's going to be a day of judgment, and it's going to be awful, and there will be great destruction. But God says, Hinei anochi sholeach lechem et Elia hanavi. But God says, before any of that happens, I'm going to send to you Elijah the prophet, Lifnei bo yom Adonai Ha-Gadol, before the great day of judgment. What's Eliyahu going to do? He's going to return the hearts of the fathers unto the sons, and the hearts of the sons unto the fathers. Eliyahu is going to restore the just most basic first order human relationships, with the people the relationships that matter most between fathers and sons within families and tight-knit communities. People's hearts apparently have been closed to one another. They've been hearts that should belong to others have been withdrawn. Everyone is withdrawn into themselves. Again, in a time of scarcity and difficulty and hardness and coldness, people have withdrawn into themselves and just refused the most basic levels of human openness and intimacy. And God says, I'm going to send to you because I care, and because what I'm most desperate for is for you to care for each other and to be and to be on good terms with each other. I'm going to send Eliyahu Hanavi, some messenger, some herald who's going to help you do that work. And so like now again, thank God we're not at levels of catastrophe yet. There aren't millions of people dying. This isn't and we're not at apocalyptic levels. It's certainly not as bad as it could be, and God willing, we will never get there. But it is a hard time, and it's a cold time, and a tough time, and it makes sense for people to withdraw into themselves and to even just forget about the people who make their lives possible, the people who are outside running around taking care of their basic needs and forgetting even just most minimal levels of generosity and kindness towards them. But I've actually felt I felt that so many of the people I know, with the communities that I am blessed to live in, there has been an outpouring of kindness and generosity and of awareness for the people who are most vulnerable and require protection and kindness. And there actually has been, I think, a movement not towards more coldness and meanness, but towards more kindness and generosity and towards greater levels of responsibility for everyone else. And I some feeling that this is the work of Eliyahu, that we are being called and being moved towards greater levels of care and concern, and to opening our hearts and to greater levels of connection, or more intimate levels of connection than we had prior. But the message still is that that we can't take that as an accomplished fact. There's always more to be done. We need to continue to hear the call of Eliyahu the prophet these days before Pesach, to continue to deepen and our efforts at connection and care and concern and responsibility for everyone else, especially for those who are vulnerable and for those who are outside making our lives possible. Have a wonderful Shabbat Ha-Gadol, and I guess if you don't see my face again, use my face to wish you a wonderful Chag Kasher B'Sameach.